Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Comic Book Nostalgia. I'm CB Nostalgia, and we have a little bit of an update on Echo. Now, as many of you know, last year's Hawkeye got its own spin-off show for one of the characters, Echo. The character herself has some pretty interesting comic book roots and is tied very close to both Daredevil and the Kingpin. We got a new report yesterday that might have revealed who the villain is for this upcoming series, and quite expectedly, this has some deep ties to not only Daredevil, but another classic Daredevil villain. Now, before we dive into this story though, I want you to take it with a grain of salt. This report comes from Screen Geek. It didn't come from Marvel Studios or Kevin Feige, so we want to put it in the proper context because nothing is ever official until one of these sources says so. Now, like we were saying, the first time we met Maya Lopez was during last year's Hawkeye, and she's about to show up in her own Disney Plus outing, Echo. Now, set photos have already confirmed that Vincent D'Onofrio will return as the Kingpin, and we had multiple reports that Charlie Cox will indeed show up as Daredevil. But one thing we haven't gotten any clues on are who the main villains of the show are going to be, and the guys over at Screen Geek have a pretty interesting report. Now, according to them, the main villain she'll be squaring off against will be the Black Knife Cartel. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Black Knife Cartel, that's perfectly okay. They actually only appeared a handful of times in the comics, and the first time was in Bullseye number 2 back in March of 2017. Like Ms. Marvel and the Clandestine, this is a rather obscure and unknown group from the comics, who, quite honestly, I do expect to be reinvented inside the MCU. During their time in Marvel Comics, they were actually led by a sadistic drug lord called Theodore Zarko, and each member of the cartel has marked their forehead with the X sign. Now, Theodore is a gangster. He's rather twisted and clearly evil, but in the comics, he doesn't have a history with Echo, but he does have a history with Bullseye. Now, Bullseye is one of Daredevil's main villains, and the possibilities of him showing up in this show would be a pretty big deal to fans and absolutely perfect. We've had a couple of versions of Bullseye show up on screen with Colin Farrell playing in the movie, but more recently in that Charlie Cox series, he was brought to life by Wilson Bethel, and they left us on quite the amazing cliffhanger, so I absolutely would love to see this version of the character come back because all the pieces are already in place. Now, in the comics, Bullseye ultimately eventually kills Theodore, establishing himself as a superior combatant, but I don't think we're going to get an absolute parallel to this story in Echo, but I do think these villains will be very much like they are in the comics. A cartel and the kind of visual nature of the X make for some good TV, and like the Tracksuit Mafia, I'm sure there's going to be some interpretation of this. It also doesn't necessarily mean Bullseye will show up in Echo, it's just he has a past with this particular organization, and I do think Marvel is looking for a way to bring back more of these classic characters. It would be great for them to set the stage for Bullseye to return. Like we were saying, he had a great character origin in Season 3 of Daredevil, and with 2024's Daredevil Born Again being such a big deal, I absolutely could see Marvel Studios putting the pieces in place to bring this villain, as well as some other characters from that Daredevil series, back to life. Now, I know you want to get all the Echo updates you can get, so make sure you hit that like and subscribe button to get not only the updates for Echo, but this very interesting world that's forming on the streets of the MCU. But until we know more, what do you guys think? How do you feel about the Black Knife Cartel being part of the upcoming Echo series? And do you think this sets the stage for Bullseye to return? Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you hit like, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you won't get any updates. Peace.